Welcome back to the Golden Blab. We have yet to be canceled. And before we could get canceled, we bring in a very special first guest, Jim Zielinski, co-creator of Golden Tee, course designer extraordinaire, now a proud participant. And, we just got back from AMOA, Jim, in Golden Tee going to the Amusement Industry Hall of Fame, in large part because of the game you and Larry Hodgson both created. So we're going to ask you a billion questions, of course, about that moment, because this is the unofficial kickoff of 35 years of Golden Tee. But first and foremost, Kevin and I were both there. We got to talk about it on the pod. From our perception, we felt bad you had to stand on the stage.
I was just going to say that, damn it.
For about an hour out there. But outside of having to stand on the stage, what was that moment for you?
Oh, yeah, it was a culmination of a lot of things. I mean, to think of any game lasting this long is pretty amazing. Very few have done it. Sports games, I think there's only one that's longer. That's Madden. I think they beat us. They've got us by 1 year. Other than that, as far as sports games, we've been doing it as long in coin-op longer than anybody. So the longevity speaks volumes to our players and our player base, because they've stuck with the game for 35 years. Many of them who started 35 years ago, 30 years ago, are still playing it today. So a lot of it goes out to their dedication.
Well, Jim, talking about the origins of Golden Tee, I'm sure people have heard bits and pieces from the various interviews you and Larry have done and the rest of the team's done over the years. But let's go back to the original idea. How did Golden Tee in its current state, how did it just become a golf game, an arcade game, something that you guys pushed out back in 1989?
Well, at the time, we were a development house. We were making games for other people. We did software for early data East pinball machines, that's how I started. I started as a playtester testing pinball machines. And then we did some work for the early computer programs like consoles like the C64 and Atari ST and things like that. So we did games basically as we were hired to do ports and conversions and original games for computer systems. We had some early success with a game called Capcom Bowling, which was a joint effort between us and Capcom. That was before I got there, and that was really successful. That was a trackball game, trackball bowling game. But that was our first coin-op effort. We had never done anything on our own. And it really wasn't working out technically, but during that time he had asked me, because I was like a big time Birdie King player. During college I would go to Aladdin's Castle in downtown Chicago, and during lunch, and a curious thing, I would see these businessmen from the financial district in their suits lining up to play Birdie King. So I kind of, there's something there for golf, because they're not playing any other game. They're all there to play Birdie King. So they wanted to play golf. But so I had some extensive, I used to play it all the time. So Larry said, hey, I need some courses, maybe you can help me with this. So I did some original courses for the golf simulator. And then when it's kind of didn't work out technically with the swing mechanism, Richard, who is our CEO, said, hey, you know what? You've got kind of the fundamentals here for a coin-op game. I mean, you have everything worked. The golf course is up there. The ball is flying down the course. Why don't you guys turn this into a coin-op game? And which we hadn't really considered at that point. So then Larry and I decided, we got together and really worked out the fundamentals of the trackball, how that worked. A big thing that was, I think, important for both of us, it was rather than have a button or a switch or some kind of control that was like an on-off switch, which a lot of games had done at that point. They've done these. There was a game called Leaderboard and some other games that would use like a timing mechanism. Start your swing, and then you
Power
click it
meters
again.
and all that.
You've played this
Oh,
crap.
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
You've played it before, but it has
Yeah.
no real relationship to golf other than, I mean, there's timing involved, but we wanted something that actually felt like you're golfing. So we really wanted to and Capcom Bowling had done a forward motion only just to throw the ball down the alley. We wanted to actually tie the trackball to the golfer and make it feel like you're that guy. And that was, I think, the fundamental innovative approach that we had. No one had done that before. No one had done a mechanism, a play mechanism that actually was that relatable and that tied to your golfer on screen. And I think that was the key. And then from that, we pretty much devised the whole way of doing hooks and slices. And the cool thing about that is you can make pretty much any shot in golf at that time, holding a beer in one hand and playing golf with the other. So that was huge. From then, we added some buttons and things as we've gone along, but the initial concept was pretty fundamentally simple.
So mechanically, right? Like, I don't know, you're talking to two guys that are talking to you because we love Golden Tee and we learned how to play Golden Tee. And at one point could play it at a high level. Kevin still can't. I really can't. But mechanically, what drew me in and what I think has drawn so many people in, obviously the real golf comparisons, because I can never shot shape a ball in real golf.
Right.
I can't. But the mechanics were perfect. They've always felt great. And obviously, we really haven't done anything to touch that, nor would we.
Nope.
But how do you guys hold that in, right? Like they did such a delicate balance of wanting things to react a certain way and maybe to break what it would normally do and to do it a specific size. So how did you guys hone that in?
Well, originally we had to kind of make sure that it felt good. And for us, it was all about feel. And so actually Larry would bring me in and he said, hey, let's do what you would call like an average shot. So I would, do it and he would record that. And they say, okay, let's do like a hard shot. So I would do that. And he would get these different varying shots and kind of hone in, okay, here's our top end, here's our bottom end, move that stuff back. And then as far as the hooks and the slices, that's a lot of back and forth, just like we play where a big part was the screen itself. And we could, like, that trackball can do a whole range of left to right.
Yeah.
But like doing the extremes is kind of crazy. So we kind of locked out the very end. We don't use the string sideways because it's not really useful. So basically, we kind of had tried to do angles that kind of mimicked what you would see on the screen. So at that time, we were a CRT monitor. And so we want, like, if your hand, I'll go up here so you can see, your hand is pulling back we didn't want it to pull back from off screen. We wanted to make sure that we pulled back from on screen on the CRT monitor. So once we had our limits, left, right, we could there fine tune the shots in between. So a lot of it was just determining what our limits were. And then at that point, just by touch and feel how the ball would curve. And then, once it did start curving, we had to play with that and those numbers to make sure that felt right.
Now, Jim, you talk about using the trackball because of the success from Capcom Bowling, which is funny because that was one of the first games I played in the arcade as a kid, was that, the Strata Bowling. I think there was like Coors Light was another version, like another skin of that.
Yeah.
But for those of us who may have downloaded the original Golden Tee ROMs and tried them on MAME, there are a couple of versions of 89 and 90 that have like a joystick configuration.
Yeah.
What
Actually, the joystick version was interesting because we had, we're trying to sell golf games any way we could. And we had a countertop Golden Tee Golf that back in the time there were a lot of these, like Dynamo had this game, I think these different touchscreen games that you could play. Even back in '89, you could play solitaire and stuff, and people would drink a beer at a bar and play, with a touchscreen. Well, we said, well, why don't we come up with a version? Maybe we can sell Golden Tee as a countertop. Well, you can't really use a trackball that needs a wide throw with your hand for a little countertop version. So we devised a way to use a joystick and buttons for that. And then I think also we were getting some interest in England, and I think they wanted to see a joystick version, but really it came from that countertop version. And I thought it was fun because it essentially gave you the same. We didn't have the feel of the force of the trackball, so pretty much it was however far back you swung was your power, and it didn't have like what we have now where you have a lot of touch. So it wasn't as good in that respect, but for a joystick version, I thought it played pretty good.
So one of I think the misconceptions around this game is that people assume it was an immediate hit and then it took the world by storm, right? And
yeah,
that wasn't the case, right? Like this, and that adds to it even cooler. So talk us through, like, this game comes out, X happens, and then what really prompted it to take the path that it is, been on for 35 years?
Well, originally we were new to this game. This was our first product. We didn't have the marketing and sales push that you needed, that other companies had. We were a tiny little company, 25, 30 people. And, so this competing with, these other companies that had hundreds of employees was hard. So, we had one sales guy. He did the best. Basically, that was a big part of it. Is just we didn't have the name. We didn't have any recognition. It was hard for us to even get our product out onto the floor of arcades and bars at that point. So for the first go around, it did okay for us, and we made some money. It did well enough where we made an upgrade. We did a Golden Tee 2, which really was a course upgrade.
Laying the foundation for future.
Yeah.
It was just a course upgrade with some artwork in the front end with the new logos and so forth. So that Gold T2 came out in I think 1990 or two. I'm sorry. 1990 I think, and that did okay too. And then we kind of went in different. I mean, we're still selling that, and then Larry and I went off and did other games. I mean, we were a game company, so I went off and did, in that time period, we did Hot Shots tennis and Rimrock and basketball. Those we worked on together. We did, Larry did a driving game. I did an NFL football game in the meantime. And then really it came back to, hey, let's go back to golf and bring that back, because we knew we could do that well. So that came with the Golden Tee 3D golf. And we had a hard time selling that one too. But then we get brought on at that point. We brought on some bigger sales staff, some people that could help move the product. We were at the time also looking to link our hardware through the internet, which no one at that point had done for a coin-operated game. It just, we're talking 92, 93. This was in the AOL CompuServe days. I mean, when you had to dial up on your internet. So nobody was really doing this for the arcades. But Richard had this idea of, hey, let's link these and let's have competitions. This is Richard, our CEO, who was working on this technology to be able to call in on a phone line, download scores, compile all the scores, send back leaderboards, and we'd have, contests for money. And that's when it really started taking off, because everybody wants to win money.
Now, Jim, when you guys first came out with 3D golf, I believe this was the first time there was a dedicated cabinet that was part of it that the sales team was pushing out there. So obviously it's a bit different now, but that cabinet stuck around for many years through the 4 era before we went to Golden Tee Live. But when you guys launched 3D golf in '95, talk to us a little bit about the Peter Jacobson tie-in, because it's a big name in golf, somebody who's been around, still a commentator today with Golden Tee PGA Tour. How did he get involved, and what was that process like working with him?
Peter Jacobson, a couple of things. We were thinking of who do we really want in the golf game, and Larry really wanted Pat Summerall, which he was at that point he was doing the Masters on CBS, and it was a well-known, even though he's a football player, he's a well-known golf commentator. Very soft, very short phrases, but it worked out for us because we don't have a whole lot of room for lengthy verbiage in our game. So and then both of us, we loved Peter Jacobson because at that point he was a real personality on the tour. He was still a pretty good tour player, and his personality just lent so much to what we did. I'd seen him on the Tonight Show. It's like, well, how many? And he was really entertaining. He said, how many golfers? This was back in 94, 95, can do that or that, have that kind of a magnetic personality. And he's got it. And so we said, let's get these guys together. We'll have Pat Summerall do the play-by-play. We'll have Peter Jacobson do all the color stuff. And Peter was kind of like the star in that. And he just went, and we've been using him ever since. We love working with Peter.
Now, I do, again, we're going to be talking to you. We were talking before we started recording a bunch. The new courses that come out, so get ready. But the new courses that come out and features and other nostalgia type things. But we'd be remiss not to talk about 35 years of courses. I get it's one of my favorite talking points to whomever we're talking to, whether it's player, an operator, a potential partner, that you have essentially, outside of Design a Hole, which probably warrants its own pod, but you have essentially you've done all of these courses, and we've talked about this a lot. So I'm curious, what was the process when you started making these courses at the onset, right? You do these original, and then you say, well, we added some courses. Like, was it something that became natural to you? And when did you figure out, like, I love to do this. This is what I want to do.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, for me, I loved doing it from the beginning. I mean, we were, the process early on was ridiculous. It was, we didn't have a 3D software program that could like design these in 3D space. We had to convert 2D art into a 3D world, which, so basically my job was, and we had this old program called Deluxe Paint, where I would draw literal vertical lines, and those were and I would in different lengths. And it was like, I'd make a shape of a fairway and I would draw vertical lines. And in between those vertical lines, we would have like our, the different, the shades of the fairway, but I would have to with the outside of the line, make a shape. And then Larry would fill that in with artwork in the program and tip it on its side. So it was flat, like a golf hole. So for the first, generation, everything was sideways for me. I never really looked down a golf hole. It was always like a flat top down sideways version of what the hole would be. And I did that so I had one color for fairways, a different color for sand traps. It was crazy. It was like we had the only depth we had was, I think we could go down a foot, like 1 foot was our limit. So we could, and that might have even been 3D. I think in the original, we had no depth. We just had a sand trap. It was just sand out there. Once we got the 3D, I got 1 foot to work with, so I can lower the sand trap 1 foot. But it's funny, but back then it's just crazy, the tools, and and since then, starting in 3D golf and moving forward, I learned how to use 3D modeling software, and that's what I use. Basically, we use the same company, the same software, and it's much further iterations now that we started with back in like 94, 95.
Jim, it's probably part of the reason why we've been able to go back and do remasters or some of these courses, because we're still using that 3D Studio Max from back in the day, and it's great that it's been, it's still compatible.
Yeah, what's nice about them is they're old file structure, file format is called a .3ds file, which is what I originally used back in the early days. You can still merge those in and see them. So yeah, anything I designed 25 years ago, I can merge in. I mean, it's not anywhere near the complexity that we have now, but I can bring that in, and the dimensions will be there, and the exact measurements will be there. And so, like, yeah, for doing these retro courses, it's a lot of fun because I just take that as a template and then build the nicer mesh that we have that we enjoy now, and put that on, and use the other one as the template for it. So it works really well.
So one of the things we're going to do before we, and we're not going to do it now, but Kevin and I told the world out there, the many millions of listeners, that we wanted to give our top 4, we'll call it blow-up holes, right? Holes, par 3s specifically, that gave us fits over time. And we'll let you interject on that as you may see fit. But I'm always curious, like, you want to design a golf hole, whether it's a hole 17 or a hole 8. I know I've asked you about this because when I started, it was like a huge curiosity. It's like being in Willy Wonka's factory, right? Like, where does this stuff come from? So
Yeah.
when you are doing this, and you've done it now, many generations, thousands upon thousands of holes, how do you start? Where do you start when you're constructing a single golf hole from scratch?
Well, the starting point is we usually pick a location, like where do we want to golf? And that's getting hard. We've gone everywhere, but some places become more popular than others. Players seem to like tropical locations. They like mountain locations within, certain degree. So we try to mix it up. There's only, maybe 10 or so basic areas, basic locations that we can choose, although we try to mix it up as best we can. So we pick that first, where do we want to go? And then within that, I know what kind of elevation I'm dealing with, what kind of obstacles and structures and things that can be used for risk. And so I try to incorporate the elements of that location into the course. So that's where I start, and then at hole 1, that one's easy because I always make it easy to make sure that we get off the tee pretty easy. We don't want to beat people up at the beginning. So hole 1's always easy. It's always flat green. And then from there, and we've been doing this forever. This is something that Larry and I, we worked on pretty, we both agreed on this from the very beginning. We wanted that round of golf to get it increasingly more tense and more, we don't want it to be harder. We just want it to be, we want the player to think more about his shots as the game progresses. So it's not like the earlier shots aren't important. They are, but especially when you're going up in a nice matchup, going into those later holes, each shot just takes a bigger importance. There's more importance, and it's harder to attain. So the whole risk reward thing, that it means something. Players respond to that. They want, if they pull off something that is hard to do and they execute it with precision and it's right, there's a feeling that you get that is why people come back to Golden Tee. They want to pull off something that's hard to do. The easy shot, no big deal. But when you pull off something and it works, it's very satisfying. And so we kind of make it so that as you get further on, the wins actually get higher as you go. All these elements make every shot much more important. So that's why the 17th, the one hole before your final shot, it's not going to be a gimme. It's going to be something that you're going to have to earn.
Jim, you talked a little bit about the original 89 and Golden Tee Golf 2 from 1990. After you guys took that couple year break, come out with 3D Golf, you put Peter Jacobson's name on the marquee, and then, you, Larry, Richard implement the tournament system, but then it becomes kind of like literally a yearly update. And back in the day, I don't know if a lot of people know this, but you'd have, Golden Tee 3D Golf, and then we'd come out with the tournament edition that was connected and all the tournaments were running. How did you guys, after you came out with 3D Golf, was the reception a bit different than it was, in 95 versus 89 with the original Golden Tee where you guys felt like there is operator response and a demand to do 3 new courses every year? And obviously the tournament system, I'm sure, helped, but there, talk to us about that essentially ever since 95, we've been doing yearly updates because of the success that you guys had.
Yeah, I think it really was a response to the players and the operators. For the first time, and this was actually a hurdle that we had to overcome when we first started out, especially in '89. I mean, people forget there were still arcades. They were very much part of the equation. I mean, the crash happened in '83, '84, where like the arcades took a nosedive, but they were still hanging around quite a bit. And there were a lot of arcades. So we were playing this game of, well, what kind of game is this? Is this an arcade game? Is this we felt it was more like a bar piece, but we were going up against his headwinds. How golf won't, first of all, video games won't do good in bars. They won't. I mean, even though Capcom Bowling had proved that wrong, they were still this mindset, well, if it's not a pool table or dart machine, I don't want it. Or actually even pinball machines. Pinball machines were still really big in bars back then. And I hate to, I think Golden Tee helped kill those things off, but I don't feel good about that. But I think it's true because of the maintenance, the upkeep, and they had one thing that we didn't have is that the better you get, the longer you played, and that's not good for earnings, So in Golden Tee, the better you get, the shorter you play. That actually works really well. So, back in the day, and then we got into 3D golf, and it was really, to answer your question, Kevin, a response when the players were demanding it. They say, we want more courses. And the operators say, hey, when do I get more? I want more courses. My players are asking me for more courses. So, yeah, it was a lot of it was demand. And, he said, okay, let's do it.
You mentioned the course location. In my job, there's very few days where I could feel like it's one of my favorite days of the year. We actually, and so everybody knows, I mean, this is the thing. We obviously have an update coming out here in the next couple of months, but you're on to the next batch of things. Now, granted, you go back and forth. This is a process as art finishes and QA comes in, you jump in, we'll do playthroughs, and so it goes, right? For better or worse, Kevin and I will help along the way with little tidbits, probably for worse. But so when you're picking these locations, and I love the process because we get to see a little bit how your mindset works. Like you have so many places that we've been. I'm just fascinated by it. Like how do you begin your own process to say, holy shit, we've been here, and here. Do you look at a map and put a giant X on?
Well, first of all, I look back on the last 5-6 years and I see what we've done. And what I don't want to do is do the same thing over and over and over again. It's like, okay, we had one that last year. We had something very similar 2 years ago. Hopefully we can bring something fresh to it. Even tropical courses are a big genre that we use. Even within that, I want to make sure that it's not the same kind of tropical course. We can you can only go to so many Caribbean islands and have the same kind of look, So let's find a tropical place that's not Caribbean. Let's find something sometimes that has volcanic stuff. Players love the lava, even though it's a little ridiculous. It's kind of fun. So let's go with and we don't want to overdo that either, though. I don't want to every year we're going to have a lava course. So we kind of mix and match it here and there. And so the big part is I look at Google Earth is huge. I look on Google Earth, I find some areas where's a place that's tropical, but it's different, or it has some kind of other unique feature. We did a course in the Maldives a few years ago. They had these really cool big rocks. That's kind of neat. That's something that we haven't done before. Let's bring that in. So that's where I kind of go with it. I kind of find an area. When we did the Scablands course, I think it was last year, 2 years ago, that was really just a crazy area. I felt wow, this is really weird. All these, there's no trees. It's all, so it's that would be a fun place to golf. And that's really how it starts. I look at hey, that would be a fun place to golf. So, and then it goes from there.
To add a little additional commentary on the development side, because Jim, one thing that we like about this podcast is it's a way to give whoever's listening, players, fans, operators, who knows,
Mhm.
a little bit of glimpse. You are, I like to say, like the tugboat for the rest of the development team, because as this becomes a very intense time for everybody, like you're like Golden Tee years, you're in
I'm
advance.
off.
Like
Yeah.
you're off. You're like the
Yeah.
Voyager mission to determine where we're going to go. And it's a really great process. The updates are not possible without doing this. But it's also a mindset change for you, where as things intensify, you're building a course that people won't see for 16, 17 months. And it's
Yeah.
a huge change.
Yeah. I have to jump back and forth because like uh, how the process is, it really works really well. It's like I'll do all the initial stuff, the I'll do the 3D model of the hole and the dimensions. Then we do a process which I think has really been helpful to us. Is we'll bring on a very rudimentary. I mean, we'll have like trees out there that look like little cartoons, and we'll bring players in and play that because you can, even though it doesn't look good, you can still play it, and I can find out. We'll bring in some really really good players. Andy Haas has been here, Greg Kinsler, and other people. We want
Adam
someone.
Kramer,
Basically,
Kevin
I want
Lindsay.
someone to take advantage of the initial design and to see what they're abusing. And so, what's really cool, our artists one of our artists, Dan, has come up with this great system where we record everything that they shoot. He plots it on a little graph for me. I see a top down version of the hole in art, and I can see exactly where they're hitting it from stroke 1 to stroke 2 to stroke 3. So I know if there's something they're exploiting or taking advantage of on that initial design. I say, oh, I see, they're going here, and then we'll plan around there. So like we'll take it away or put a lake there. Like we'll do things like I don't want to do that for like a legitimate shot, but if they're clearly going off in the woods somewhere or doing something, or it's a little bit too easy, especially later in the course, we're like in the back half of the back nine, and they're just killing it. Because I also get score data. I said, well, that's way too easy for a hole 15. Then I'll make adjustments. I'll either tip the green some more, make the green smaller, add a sand trap where I need to. So that whole process is great. And then once that happens, it goes off into the art world, and they put the trees on. They make all the textures look good. The gameplay standpoint, it's already done at that point. The trees really don't move; they just change. They'll move from a cartoon tree to a real tree. And once they have that all populated, the artist, I'll get it back, go through it, make sure that nothing changed, that like nothing, everything still plays the same, and then they continue, and then I move on to designing next year's. So it's really a good process.
Jim, how often do you find yourself going through and adjusting a particular hole or course on average? Each year we're doing 5 to 7, Jim Z courses, as we like to call them.
Yeah,
Once you get that first set of player data, or even the second set, do you find yourself tweaking them often? I know there's
I have
times where
to. Yeah.
Adam and I have come in and been like, hey, it'd be cool if we did this, but we try
No,
not to
no.
do it
I
too
like
much.
when I play it. It's like I play the game, and then I'm sitting at my computer, and it's a tweaking process, and I'll play it, and I'll adjust, like, oh, that sand trap's not where it should be. I'll move the sand trap, or well, I could we could use a couple more blocking trees around the tee here so that they don't shoot straight through it. Like iteration wise, each hole, I would say minimum of 20 iterations before we get to the final, of just going back and forth. And that's just constant. Like even when, like, I'll get back these holes that we're going to release next fall from the artist, and I'll make adjustments there, that a little tweaks here and there. Sometimes it's just moving tee areas, um, making things more challenging. If I find it, like, because I'm an average player, so it's like I'm a good barometer for if I'm an average player and I find this too easy, then it's going to be too easy for me and the players above. So I'll make adjustments. That's not always based on what the players do in that process. A lot of times it's just me playing and evaluating it.
I will say on the course betas, it was tricky for a couple of years with COVID and trying to get our feet under us. And actually, beyond having the great players there, we'll take our employees, and it's
Yeah.
fun watching like these guys play rounds in, and largely average to below
Yeah.
average golfers. No
Yeah.
offense, that is what it is. Kevin and I are somewhere in between, but that data. So this is and it's a perfect segue. I guess to start talking about some of these round breakers that we'll do. But you have I think the Golden Tee world's a lot bigger. I think sometimes than, guys shooting 20, 25, whatever
Yeah.
under, like the average score being what it is, which is much, much worse than that. How are you able, and I think it's truly the toughest thing that you have to accommodate the everyman, so to speak, to make it engaging for the great golfers and also not make that new player want to just throw themselves through the bar window the first time they play?
Well, it's funny you mentioned this kind of balance because Larry and I, it's always been something that we've been conscious of because we've seen games in our industry chase the better players. And I saw pinball go through this, way back in the day, and they basically started designing games towards their upper level players, their most vocal players. And the games got more complicated. They started adding more and more digits to the score displays. It got to the point where an everyday player was saying, I don't even know what this is anymore. I saw it happen in fighting games where they would come up with updates that were more and more complicated. You had to learn moves that were more and more, and then they kind of lost track of how they got there in the first place. Larry and I both said, let's not let that happen to Golden Tee. So we made an emphasis always to make sure that the average guy was having fun. Because that is the lifeblood of the game. Even though it's, you see the players at the Worlds and they're great, and I have nothing but admiration for these guys. But if you look in terms of sheer volume and numbers, the majority of Golden Tee games get played by average people, and they average around even, maybe a little bit better than even, -1, -2. Now, for a lot of the players who are into the game, that sounds ridiculous, but that's what they shoot. The majority of players. So the great thing is we get all the data. We look at it and we can see, okay, what are these? How often do they play? How much do they play? And as much as the upper level gold guys play, it doesn't even compare to the volume and the amount that the guys below them play. But Golden Tee probably wouldn't be where it is without those upper level players either. They're extremely important to the game. We want you to have an experience that you can become good at and become a master at. So it's really important to get both sides. So it's a lot easier because they're probably more vocal and more in the limelight to kind of focus on the best players in the world. And they're very important. But I always make sure that I'm not forgetting the guy who's back at his bar playing once or twice a week. That guy needs to have fun too.
All right. Well, that's a perfect segue to the holes that have driven us absolutely crazy.
And actually, real quick, before we get to that, Jim, I have to respectfully put you on the spot because I will get chastised if I don't ask this. When you are designing courses, do you care at all about the golf balls, like the stouts, are you designing courses based on the equipment that people are using out in the field?
The only time that I will design around equipment, which I normally don't do. I don't really care how you play. I don't care whether you're playing a stout or any other kind of where I will design around equipment will be as far as tee distances. Early on, when we didn't have the better equipment, I could put hazards at 310, 320, 330, and that would be a challenge. I can't do that anymore. I mean, with the equipment, those things now have to be. The real golf's doing the same thing.
They are.
I have to put those now at 350, 360, 370. So it's in terms of that, the equipment, it does change the way that I have to challenge the better players. Other than that, I do have a guide that I use that basically tells me the distance of every club. Now there are in-betweens that some are bigger. That I call them gaps, club gaps, where especially in the stock mode, and then if with other basic sets, there are gaps that I will use, especially on par threes. I want that. I want a player to make a shot. I don't want him to just walk up and that thing be dialed in on the pin. So a lot of times I will use those gaps and those distances to make sure that for a lot of the club sets, this might, especially later on, hole 17, hole 18, a big one is the short shots. There are huge gaps in the 1 yard to 100-yard range, like the smallest wedge to the largest wedge. I will intentionally put par threes, those really short ones. You remember the one on Vegas? That one comes to mind. The Vegas sign hole, as people refer to it. That was intentionally put in a gap where you're either going long or going short, based on, because we don't have a whole lot of resolution in those wedges. So that little that little range of clubs gives me the most gaps, but there are other ones later on. So those are the only two instances where I really design around the equipment.
And loft and golden tees too, right? I mean, you had to, I know in talking to you for many years, that was a big, when a 9-wood is there.
Loft is, I had to change for that. The 9 would kill us when we added that. It was like, it changed so much of what I could do because now you can hit over everything. And before the 9-wood and the 8-wood and the 7-wood, we had the 5-wood was the most loft we had. So I could design pretty much around a normal tree would block those shots. But now with the 9-wood, it's become a lot harder. I have to now make a hill underneath the tree to block a shot. So I still get around it. I mean, I know exactly where the apex heights are for all those clubs. So as I'm going through, I measure it out and see if the 9-wood could clear it or not. But it makes making flat holes, flat courses a lot harder because it pretty much has to be water and other hazards in order to make any kind of challenge.
So with that, let's reveal our round killers, par threes. Now you said something that's really interesting though, because we're going to talk about these holes being difficult, right? But I think for me, a lot of these go back to where I started learning to play Golden Tee, and one of the reasons I include them because there was such satisfaction in being able to master this hole. So I'll give you my list first, and then I want to ask you about one specific hole, which I think will be familiar with a lot of people that have played the game a long time. So number 4 for me, Auburn Glen, hole 17. Number 3, Heather Point, hole 17, which in live, I think was that first statement hole of holy crap, if I missed this right, I'm falling off a cliff. Number 2, Kevin and I feel like I've talked about this hole quite a bit, Sunnywood, hole 16, which I think is sneaky very difficult because it's not the same hazards. Then number 1, Grand Savannah, hole 17. So we're not going to ask you about all these. It was funny before we're recording, I had the wrong Sunnywood hole. We all have to go back and make sure we remember these. But Grand Savannah, hole 17, when that came out, it's a great hole, but it's really, really hard. And we were kind of joking before we came on that it could have been even harder. So what about that hole? It's kind of infamous in terms of its design.
Yeah, I mean, it was harder than it was when it actually ended up. I originally wanted that hole to be almost an undrivable. If the pin was on the left, you had to play to the right. In a lot of golf, I mean, you'll see it in the Masters every year. It's coming up in a few weeks. There are par threes where you do not go at the pin, and this is really, I think it's 12 or 13 in the Masters, where if that pin's on the left, you're risking a lot, So players, I wanted a hole like that where it's like, okay, you can go for it if you want, but really the play is to gauge your distance on the right and try for the putt.
Pump it in the back.
I originally had that, and then Steve Selby was working for us at the time. He just said, this is way too hard. Cause it was almost impossible. It was actually thinner than it was on the left side. There's no way you could do it. It was hard.
To
really
be
hard.
clear, if you hitting on the left side still is not
No, it's not easy.
you
But
know,
it's harder.
and
So
hitting it over was actually the worst. If you're hitting it out of the
yeah.
rough,
Oh yeah, if
you're
you're up on
toast.
top there, forget it.
Yeah, no, it's and again, I love this hole, so that would be mine. Kevin, you can give your list now.
Yeah, so for me, I have kind of a mix of older courses and new ones, but my number 4 is Moor Black 17. A lot of players that are new to the game or just listening to this podcast are going to say that that effing sandbank in the middle of hole 17 just really screws up a round. And then I have Castleshire 17 as just both the original Castleshire 17 and the remastered one. It with the wrong wind setup and the wrong uphill slope. That ball, if you try to get cute, which I've done a lot, and you're trying to go for GSPs or a hole in one, it's either break or bust, and that happens a lot.
That hole in particular, I liked it because it taught people, and a lot of people, how to do an inside out shot and to cut it into the wind. And there are a lot of play. If that wind's coming from the left, and you hit that shot, you're done for. If you hit a straight shot, I'll let the wind blow me. That's not going to work. You have to bend it the other way, and that's what I love about that hole. It teaches people, once you learn that, it's like, oh, well, this isn't that hard. And now the only hard part is, I think, when the wind's blowing from the right, actually is a little bit more difficult, because once you buck the wind, it kind of stops the ball and it kind of floats straight down. So it's not so bad. But yeah, I love that hole.
Well, and that leads me to my number 2, which is Eagles Peak 17. Again, another remastered course, but 3 different tiers on the green, a left 10 slope. Especially to me, it's even harder in the Golden Tee Live, Golden Tee PGA Tour era than it was in the original Golden Tee 4, because you have backspin, bite, roll, and release.
Right.
And it gives you more options, but it also, in my head, it gives you more ways to screw it up. And even if you stay dry, pins on the top tier, you get on that bottom tier, turbo putts be damned, you're still very, very unlikely to pull away with a birdie on that one. And
yeah, you just hope that you're on that hole. You hope that your pin is in a big area, because if it's up on the ledge, you're in trouble.
And number 1, which I think is on Adam's honorable mention list, is Southern Oaks 16. This was I believe in the era of right before we started the Golden Tees. So if you were going with backspin or roll with an up 5, left 8 with the wind in your face, that to me, especially in my era where I was really going from like the casual Golden Tee player to competitive, that was just a complete ass kicker. And even still with bite and all that, it's still all the different equipment options, it's still hard to really master that hole.
To add to that too, it was the distance, right? Because you were hitting a 3 iron in, you're hitting these low irons, and you
nice
had
hops
a big
right
wind.
into the water.
Because on the surface, I remember it didn't look that hard. Like, it's straightforward in what you have to do. But the distance to me was always a killer. You're coming in low, you're coming in hot.
Yeah.
It's a great hole. It is. It's a great hole.
Again, this is another one of those measured holes for the gaps, because the lower irons, you don't have a hole. You can't finesse those like you can with you don't have the carry to do it. Like with a higher club, you can you have time to let the ball land. With those clubs are coming line drive, you got to be pinpoint accurate where that thing's going to land, because it'll bounce a good 20 yards, so especially with backspin, you got to know what and that green is so small, you really don't have a lot of green to work with, as far as like, I'll just go back. I'll go back 20 yards and then use back, but no, there's a mound there. You can't do that. So yeah, that whole course I love. It's one of my favorites, but because you have to earn your eagles. You have to earn every one of them. But the players, because their scores they don't like it. Because they're, instead of shooting 28s and 30s, that course will eat you up. And I kind of like it. I like that challenge. I like having to earn basically you have to have 3 good shots, for your, or 2 good shots for your eagle and a putt, it's not for every, but I've learned that the harder courses like that don't get played as much. Unfortunately, I like them, but here's again where we have to kind of go where the audience takes us, and the audience doesn't want to get beat up. They're not really beat up. It's just not as easy as other courses are. So they want their eagles. They want to, so give them what they want.
I would like some eagles. I could use them in the state of my playing style. Well, Jim, we really appreciate it. Again, congratulations on the honor. It is a tremendous honor. We were honored to be a part of it. It was, again, an incredible experience to be a part of. And look, we kind of teased it. I think we'll be talking to you more and more, both on the 35th anniversary side, which is exciting, and also on the update side, like when it comes to courses and features and stuff that we're meeting about actively now. I really think this is a great forum. We do videos and articles and social media posts and things, but I also think it's really cool to get your mindset of, a certain course that's going to an area. Why, and what can we expect? And I think this will be a great place to talk through that. So obviously we'll be talking to you in the future, and just get ready for that. Unfortunately,
Great.
Kevin and I
Sounds
can't
good.
talk. So next week, of course, we will be back. We will keep the streak alive, I think, for the Golden Blab. For Jim, for Kevin, I'm Adam. We will talk to you guys soon.